The countdown clock hits 0. Silence. Inside the control room, the glow of monitors paints every face in cold blue light. Telemetry scrolls. Altitude climbs. Engineers track numbers that suddenly begin to drift off script. Outside, a rocket cuts through the sky, balanced between history and humiliation. Then, a flash, a violent spin. The screen blooms with fire. Another explosion. Millions of dollars disappear in seconds. Years of design and calculation fall as debris into the Pacific. Cameras keep rolling. The world watches in real time. Investors, somewhere far from the launch pad, begin recalculating their patience. At the center of it all stands Elon Musk. No visible panic, no outward collapse. Just silence as the fourth launch attempt dissolves into smoke. 4 failures. Behind closed doors, the numbers are harsher than the headlines. SpaceX is weeks from bankruptcy. Payroll hangs in question. Suppliers are restless. Commentators sharpen their verdict. Another billionaire who mistook rockets for toys. But the pressure doesn't end at the launch pad. At Tesla Inc., production targets slip. Cash burn intensifies. Critics dismiss the electric car dream as fantasy. Wall Street calls it irresponsible. Short sellers sense blood in the water. 2 companies, billions at risk, reputations stretched thin, and one decision left. Do you preserve what remains? Protect your wealth? Walk away with something intact? Or do you risk everything? Again? In a quiet conference room, long after the cameras leave, the answer is chosen. One final launch, no backup plan, no safety net, only conviction. Because for Musk, failure was never the headline, it was the filter. And what survives the fire doesn't just recover, it redefines the field. Today, Elon Musk operates less like a traditional CEO and more like a force field. Markets move when he posts a sentence. Engineers reorganize around his deadlines. Politicians respond to platforms he controls. Supporters frame him as a builder of the future. Critics see a destabilizing power in an already fragile world. Very few view him as neutral. That alone makes him significant. In an era where corporate leadership is measured and rehearsed, Musk operates in public, in real time. He doesn't soften ambition. He doesn't disguise risk. He treats the future like an engineering problem, something that can be solved if you push hard enough. To some, that is courage. To others, it is recklessness. Either way, it commands attention. His influence extends beyond technology now. It touches debates about artificial intelligence, free speech, transportation, space commercialization, work ethic, and the shape of digital power. He embodies a new archetype, the hypervisible executive who is simultaneously innovator, provocateur, and symbol. What makes him matter is not just what he builds, but the pressure he applies. Automakers accelerated because they had to. Space agencies reconsidered cost structures because they were forced to. Social media companies were pulled into open debates about ownership and influence. Whether admired or resisted, he triggers reaction, and reaction is influence. But public force often conceals private strain. Long before rockets and factories, there was a quiet boy growing up in Pretoria, a place orderly on the surface, tense underneath. The household was intellectually demanding and emotionally complex. His father, an engineer, valued logic and relentless standards. His mother, a model and dietitian, embodied independence and resilience. Expectations were rarely spoken aloud, but they filled the room. Intelligence was assumed. Competence was required. Weakness found little tolerance. There were periods of visible comfort, large houses, technical equipment, access to resources, and periods of instability. Prosperity could shift. Security felt conditional. A child notices that abundance can disappear. Control matters. At school, Musk was not dominant. He was quiet, analytical, often targeted. Bullying was severe enough to leave physical scars. Isolation became routine. Books became refuge. Science fiction became architecture for something larger. When social systems feel hostile, two paths usually appear: retreat or redesign the system. He chose redesign. He absorbed information obsessively: encyclopedias, programming manuals, physics texts beyond his age. Computers weren't just entertainment, they were leverage. In code, the rules were consistent. Inputs produced outputs. Effort produced results. Unlike playground hierarchies, logic was fair. Emotionally, that distinction is powerful. A childhood where approval feels conditional can produce paralysis or extreme self-reliance. Musk developed the latter. He grew comfortable alone with ideas, comfortable betting on himself, comfortable with risk, because social loss had already been endured. Then came migration. Leaving South Africa as a teenager wasn't an escape toward comfort. It was a move toward possibility. Geographic distance became psychological separation. He wasn't running from instability. He was stepping into uncertainty by choice. That decision revealed a pattern that would repeat throughout his life. Detach from safety if it limits scale. The pressures of childhood, intellectual intensity at home, hostility at school, fluctuating financial security, forged a mindset that would later drive billion-dollar gambles. Control your environment. Build systems that can't ignore you. Take risks before safety makes you small. If something doesn't exist, create it. Many people experience hardship and seek stability. Musk experienced hardship and sought expansion. And expansion, by definition, demands pressure. Publicly celebrated, privately endured. That difference is everything. The boy who disappeared into science fiction wasn't chasing popularity. He was chasing agency, a position in life where rejection no longer mattered because the work would speak louder than any room he entered. Childhood didn't simply give him ambition. It compressed it, tempered it, hardened it. Before rockets failed on live broadcasts, before markets tracked his net worth by the hour, there was a quieter, more personal gamble: leaving home. At 17, Elon Musk made a decision that sounds heroic in hindsight and terrifying in real time. He would leave South Africa, not with a scholarship waiting, not with investors lined up, but with a belief that staying would make his world smaller. Courage rarely feels like confidence when you're living it. It feels like uncertainty with no guarantees. He arrived in Canada with limited money and no safety net. There were stretches of couch surfing, relatives he barely knew, odd jobs that paid just enough to cover rent, manual labor, cold winters that stripped away any romantic narrative about chasing opportunity. Ambition feels different when you're calculating groceries week to week. And in those quiet moments, after long shifts, in unfamiliar rooms, doubt settles in softly. What if I miscalculated? What if belief is just ego? It's easy to imagine scale when you're still imagining. It's heavier when you're alone in a foreign country with no proof you matter. There were no venture capitalists waiting, no institutional safety net, just a young immigrant navigating systems that didn't recognize his name. Even after transferring to the University of Pennsylvania, the pressure didn't ease. It sharpened. Tuition bills, academic expectations. The quiet understanding that failure wouldn't just be embarrassing, it would mean regression. For someone who already felt out of place growing up, The idea of returning home without forward motion wasn't abstract. It was personal. Then came the escalation. He enrolled in a PhD program at Stanford University. Prestige, structure, a path that reassures families and stabilizes futures. And then he walked away, 2 days in, not after years of planning, not after securing capital. 2 days. There was no prior exit, no fortune, no safety cushion. Leaving meant abandoning certainty for the internet, an industry still chaotic and largely unproven. Imagine explaining that decision. Then imagine the silence afterward, when adrenaline fades. No degree, no fallback. Just a conviction that the web would reshape everything, and the willingness to be publicly wrong if it didn't. That kind of decision doesn't feel cinematic at midnight. It feels heavy. This was his first true, adult-level gamble, and at that moment, there was no evidence it would pay off. Momentum rarely announces itself. For Musk, it began quietly, with code. The mid-1990s internet wasn't polished. It was raw infrastructure waiting to be built. Most people saw novelty. He saw foundation. Years of solitary reading, obsessive programming, and pattern recognition suddenly had context. With his brother, he built a digital city guide. Simple, practical, early. Businesses didn't yet understand why they needed an online presence. Investors didn't fully understand what was forming. But preparation met timing. When the company sold, it wasn't just money, it was validation. And validation is dangerous when you're wired for expansion. Instead of stepping back, he moved forward into online finance at a moment when traditional banks were cautious and skeptical. Digital money felt fragile, unsafe, premature. That tension was the opportunity. The venture evolved, merged, and eventually became PayPal. As e-commerce expanded, trust in online transactions grew. Every successful payment increased credibility. Every user strengthened the network. Then came the acquisition by eBay. Scale changed overnight. Suddenly, he had capital large enough to choose security for life. Diversify. Retire quietly. Instead, he concentrated. Comfort was available. He declined it. The capital became fuel for risk, poured into aerospace and electric vehicles, industries known for punishing ambition. Experts warned against it. Aerospace was dominated by governments and defense contractors. Automotive manufacturing was capital-intensive and ruthless, but momentum reframes impossible as merely difficult. If software could disrupt finance, why couldn't engineering discipline disrupt rockets? If digital infrastructure could reshape communication, why couldn't battery technology reshape transportation? One bet enabled the next. When early rockets failed at SpaceX, previous capital kept the lights on. When skepticism around electric vehicles intensified at Tesla Inc., prior credibility bought time. Each risk absorbed the shock of the next. Breakthroughs are rarely lightning strikes. They are chain reactions. Preparation sparked the first flame. Timing amplified it. Validation supplied oxygen. And instead of cashing out, he escalated. By the time the world labeled him visionary, the engine had been running for years, step by step, risk by risk, compounding. But velocity has weight. From the outside, the public sees launches, product reveals, headlines. What it doesn't see is the psychological toll of sustaining that velocity for decades. Pressure at that altitude isn't occasional, it's structural. When your identity is tied to companies like Tesla and SpaceX, you're not managing projects. You're carrying payroll for tens of thousands of employees. You're managing investor expectations that swing daily. You're operating under regulators, media scrutiny, and online commentary that never turns off. There is no clean boundary between work and life when the mission feels existential. Time compresses. Sleep becomes negotiable. Weekends blur into production cycles and launch windows. Even victories feel temporary because the next quarter is already approaching. Burnout at that level doesn't look like collapse. It looks like intensity sustained beyond normal limits. Then comes criticism. Amplified, global, permanent. Every decision dissected, every post analyzed, delays framed as incompetence, success reframed as luck. For someone wired to push harder under pressure, criticism can become fuel, but fuel still burns. Financial risk adds another layer. Musk repeatedly placed the majority of his personal wealth back into his companies during unstable moments. Publicly, that reads as conviction. Privately, it means knowing one miscalculation could cascade. Extreme wealth does not eliminate risk when most of it remains concentrated and volatile. And then there is family, marriages that strained under intensity, children growing up adjacent to global attention, geographic moves, custody arrangements, long absences shaped by production deadlines and crisis calls. The mythology of changing the world rarely accounts for missed dinners, compressed conversations, or the quiet cost of maintaining intimacy when work consumes identity. Publicly, the narrative is expansion. Privately, the cost compounds. And that contrast between visible success and invisible strain may be the most defining feature of his story. Because expansion always demands something in return. The question has never been whether Elon Musk can build. The question is what sustained building requires and who ultimately carries that weight. Ambition has gravity. It bends time, it distorts priorities, it pulls focus toward the horizon and away from the room you're standing in. For Elon Musk, that gravity has always been powerful. On stage, it looks like certainty, crisp answers, long arcs of vision, a belief in acceleration. Faster rockets, faster cars, faster transitions, progress measured in velocity. But acceleration has consequences. In private, speed compresses everything it touches. Relationships strain under constant urgency. Partnerships carry the weight of unpredictable schedules and public scrutiny. Parenting unfolds inside a life where crises can erupt before breakfast and headlines can reshape a week before dinner. None of this cancels the achievement, it contextualizes it. From a distance, high-level success appears expansive. More influence, more capital, more reach. Up close, it is also subtraction. Less anonymity, less margin for missteps, fewer places to fail quietly. Every decision echoes across markets, across media, across a family dinner table, and sustaining that echo for years demands a kind of resilience most people are never required to build. Pressure did not soften him, it refined him. In the early years, his leadership carried the intensity of someone racing time itself. Technical, exacting, relentless. Deadlines were not suggestions, they were declarations. Teams were pushed past comfort, sometimes past sustainability. When outcomes aligned, it felt visionary. When they didn't, fractures appeared. In morale, in communication, in public trust. Then came the brink. Near bankruptcy at Tesla, Inc., rocket failures at SpaceX. Moments when payroll hovered in uncertainty and suppliers hesitated. In those periods, one lesson hardened into clarity. Brilliance does not scale by force alone. Systems do. The evolution was gradual but visible. Urgency gave way to iteration. Instead of wagering everything on flawless execution, the culture leaned into rapid prototyping. Build, test, break, rebuild. Vertical integration tightened control. First principles thinking expanded from engineering problems to organizational design. He embedded deeper into factory floors and design reviews, not for symbolism, but for leverage over variables that could determine survival. There was another shift, quieter, more internal. Early ambition often carries a need to prove, to critics, to markets, to history. Over time, that edge matures. The focus widens from proving something works to ensuring it endures. Reusable rockets not as spectacle, but as permanent cost curve change. Manufacturing ecosystems built to outlast quarterly volatility. The timeline stretched. Public criticism intensified during production delays and market turbulence. Instead of retreating, he moved toward visibility, sometimes bluntly, sometimes imperfectly, but with awareness that leadership now unfolds on global platforms as much as inside boardrooms. Silence can be misread. Narrative is a strategic asset. Pressure did not narrow his scope, it expanded it. When boxed in, he increased the size of the box, entering industries others avoided, acquiring platforms others hesitated to touch. Not reckless chaos, but calculated disruption. An understanding that scale can be a defensive strategy. Market cycles came and went. Valuations surged, then contracted. Early financial strain had sharpened his appetite for risk. Later, volatility strengthened his tolerance for it. Over time, reactions to short-term swings appeared less urgent, more anchored in decade-long theses: electrification, multi-planetary infrastructure, artificial intelligence at industrial scale. Not softer ambition, steadier ambition. Leadership growth also showed in repetition, not just breakthrough moments, but repeatable execution. Rockets landing again and again, manufacturing lines scaling, battery pipelines advancing through disciplined iteration. These outcomes require institutional learning, absorbing past bottlenecks, reinforcing structural resilience. He stopped trying merely to enter industries. He began redesigning them. Setbacks did not reduce the vision. They forced it into stronger architecture, systems built to compound rather than spike. Pressure reveals character. Sustained pressure builds structure, and structure allows ambition to survive long enough to matter. Financially, the arc mirrors that philosophy. His wealth is less about accumulation than concentration. After early liquidity events, rather than dispersing risk across passive holdings, he reinvested heavily into ventures he could directly influence. Equity over salary, ownership over diversification, compensation structured around aggressive milestones rather than guaranteed extraction. The approach amplified volatility. When valuations climbed, net worth surged. When markets corrected, it contracted just as dramatically. A high-exposure strategy, financially and psychologically. Control of capital deployment remained central. Reinvestment into infrastructure took precedence over distributing comfort. Vertical integration strengthened independence. Personal capital was repeatedly placed at risk during critical phases, not as spectacle, but as alignment between belief and exposure. Even the acquisition of Twitter, now operating as X, followed that pattern. Direct ownership of a communications platform, accepting leverage and reputational turbulence in exchange for structural control. Whether debated or defended, it fit the thesis. Ownership shapes direction. Beneath the boldness is discipline. Most financial exposure remains tied to long-duration technological bets: electrification, space infrastructure, artificial intelligence scaling. Risk concentration creates fragility in the short term, but when aligned with structural industry shifts, it can produce non-linear returns. Yet even exponential outcomes carry cost. Public triumph is visible. Launches, product unveilings, market reactions. Private pressure is quieter. The responsibility of thousands of employees, the volatility that can reshape fortunes overnight, the persistent scrutiny that follows every decision. Success expands influence. It also narrows privacy. And still, the long-term impact extends beyond balance sheets. In automotive and aerospace, expectations shifted. What once felt speculative, reusable rockets, mass-market electric vehicles, entered strategic roadmaps across industries. Competitors recalibrated. Governments responded.